Step off my flight line, new girl, and stay in that pavilion until I call your name. The 31st Fighter Wing does not babysit contractors on a real Air Force base." 200 airmen heard it. Every one of them stood at the position of attention, with their eyes forward, and did not move. The Apennines were pink on the horizon. The sky above the Italian plain had not yet decided between night and morning. A thin copper line at the mountain ridge line, nothing more. F-16. Charlies sat in the open bay of Hangar 3 behind them, cold and still, their intake mouths gaping in the pre-dawn dark. Chief Master Sergeant Quentin Brooks, 53, Wing Command Chief of the 31st Fighter Wing, had crossed 12 strides of asphalt in under 9 seconds to reach her. In the next 4 seconds, he slapped the clipboard out of her hands. It skidded 15 feet across the painted yellow safety line, seized her left bicep through the navy polo, pivoted her bodily toward the visitor pavilion 200 meters away, and delivered the line. Public. Mid-sentence in his own pass-down formation, 200 sets of eyes on him, and he did not care. She did not tense. That was the first thing. The muscle under his grip absorbed the geometry of his hand without resistance, not compliance. Something older than compliance. Something trained into the body at a level below conscious decision. Senior Master Sergeant Owen Halpern, 49, stood at the rear of the formation in Security Forces utilities and registered it in under 2 seconds. He did not step forward. He began counting. Master Sergeant Bryce Naylor, 46, stepped from behind Brooks and drove a 2-handed shove between her shoulder blades. She went down. Right hip, right palm. But the hip rotated cleanly into the landing, both palms flat to the asphalt simultaneously, not groping, not scrambling. No flail. No cry. Breathing unchanged. She rose in 3 seconds. No rush, no anger, no performance of either. Retrieved the clipboard with both hands, brushed grit from her right palm, and walked to the visitor pavilion under her own power without looking back. The formation stood in silence. Halpern reached 3 in his count. He stopped counting. He did not stop watching. Her name on the badge read, M. Latimer. She wore a generic AFSEC contractor lanyard with a visitor badge, tan slacks, a navy polo, low-heel loafers. No rank, no insignia, no name tape. She had arrived at 06:20 hours and gone directly to the flight line with the clipboard angled. She glanced at the F-16s, the way someone looks at furniture they already know the dimensions of, familiar enough to not require study. Before Brooks ever reached her, she had spoken to a junior crew chief whose torque log she read upside down from 3 feet. 212 Alpha, airmen. She did not look at the clipboard when she said it. AFI 21-101, subparagraph 212 Alpha. The crew chief stared at her like she had named a statute he didn't know existed. She moved on. Brooks assessed her across 90 seconds and broke off mid-sentence. At the visitor pavilion, she set the clipboard on the table, removed her pen, and began to write. Not notes. An incident log, time, location, names, exact words, witness count, the clipboard's skid distance estimated at 15 feet, the position of Naylor's hands at the moment of the shove. The pen moved without hesitation. She did not rub her hip. She did not look toward the formation. She underlined the word, Naylor, and drew a small box around it. At the rear of the dispersing formation, Halpern pulled out his personal cell phone, not the government-issued device. He photographed the yellow safety line where she had landed, the clipboard skid mark on the asphalt, and the corner of the visitor pavilion where she was still writing, still not looking up. He put the phone away. Then he looked at the open bay of Hangar 3. The F-16 row, the phase dock doors, the disposition records window on the annex wall. He walked toward the Security Forces building without glancing at Brooks or Naylor. He already had a question. He did not yet have an answer. The question was simple. Combat controllers who spent 8 years in the 24th Special Operations Wing knew what the absence of fear looked like in a body that had been under contact before. They knew it at the cellular level, the particular quality of stillness in a person who was choosing how to respond rather than reacting. He had seen it in operators running high-risk personnel recovery in denied terrain. He had seen it in pilots who'd come back with airframes ventilated by 23mm cannon. He had never once seen it in a contractor on a NATO flight line at 0620 on a Tuesday morning in northeastern Italy. He had not stopped watching because what he was watching did not make sense yet. And things that did not make sense yet were, in his experience, the things that mattered most. 40 minutes after the formation, Captain Derek Ewan, 31, the wing's maintenance operations officer, had been ordered by Brooks to give the contractor 30 minutes and move her along. In the 22 minutes that followed inside Hangar 3, Ewan would say 19 words. She would say fewer. And what she produced from a glanced-at clipboard in Phase Doc 3 would leave Staff Sergeant Phoebe Carlin, 27, staring at the door she walked through long after she was gone. From the secondary office window overlooking the hangar floor, Halpern leaned forward, just slightly, for the first time. She knelt beside the left main landing gear assembly of F-16, Charlie Tail 912, Block 50, on jacks for scheduled phase inspection. She read the torque log upside down from 3 feet. Read it once. Then she wrote on the clipboard without consulting a reference, without asking anyone for a number, without opening the technical order, binder sitting 2 feet from her left hand on the maintenance stand. What she wrote: upper drag, brace fitting, 2 18-inch pounds recorded against, TO 1F16, Charlie 6 specification of 210 to 215. 3-inch pound deviation on a primary structural fitting. She included the technical order reference, the recorded value, the out-of-tolerance delta, and the crew chief's employee ID number. She stood, moved the pen back to the clipboard's document loop, and looked at Ewan. He stared at her. Carlin stared at her. 200 hours of phase training between them, and neither one had caught it on the morning pass-through. When Ewan attempted to redirect her toward the administrative bay, citing that her audit scope covered only flight line documentation, not open phase aircraft, she said 2 words: 212 Alpha. Flat. No elaboration, no apology, no accompanying explanation of what the subparagraph contained. It was the exact provision of AFI 21-101 that granted auditor access to all open maintenance actions, including phase inspection aircraft. She held eye contact until Ewan stepped aside. She addressed him by rank only. Captain. 1 word. She did not smile. She did not explain herself a second time. In the maintenance records section of the Hangar 3 annex, she requested the last 14 months of Phase Doc 3 disposition records, specifically TCTO 1F16 CG 791 compliance logs, and their associated supply chain transaction numbers. Carlin began pulling the records. Ewan stepped out of the room. Mariana, still writing, said to no one in particular, "Supply transaction dates, not installation dates." Carlin stopped. That phrase was not on any standard contractor checklist. It was not a safety audit query. It was the specific data pool you ran when you suspected falsified parts procurement timing, a forensic accounting technique borrowed from defense contract fraud investigation. Not a flight safety technique. Not anything a civilian aviation safety auditor would know to ask for. Carlin handed her the records without speaking. Mariana copied the key fields and returned the originals. She was done in 4 minutes. Ewan did not come back into the room. From the secondary office window, Halpern had watched her move through the hangar. In the 6 seconds after Ewan addressed her at the phase dock entrance, she swept 4 exit points: bay door, north personnel door, maintenance annex door, Fire exit behind the aircraft row, before she answered him. She tracked a fuel truck crossing the far apron through the open bay door twice during the records conversation, without breaking eye contact with Carlin. She never positioned with her back to the vehicle bay approach. Not once. Halpern typed 2 lines into his personal phone. He read them back once, then sent. Put the phone face down on the desk, and walked back to the watch floor without looking at the hangar again. He was not done asking questions. He was, however, starting to get answers he did not have clearance for, and the gap between what he was observing and what he was permitted to know about it was becoming a problem he would need to resolve on personal time using a personal device. 8 years in the 24th had taught him that problems of this kind did not improve with waiting. They sharpened. He was the Wing's Security Force's senior NCO. His job was to protect this base. He had just watched something on the hangar floor that suggested the base needed protecting from people who were supposed to be inside the wire. Ewan stepped into the corridor and called Brooks's office. 5 words. She knew the torque spec. The line was silent for 4 full seconds, the kind of silence that comes when a man is recalibrating, reassessing something he believed he already understood. Then Brooks said, "I'll handle it." Ewan did not ask what that meant. He would later wish he had. He would think about those 4 seconds of silence for a long time, the shape of them, the specific weight of a man who runs a network, deciding whether a problem is manageable or something else. He would not find a word for what it had felt like to stand in that corridor and hear it, but he would remember the silence. By 1000 hours, Brooks had made 3 phone calls. By 10:30, the Wing knew the contractor's name, the name on the badge, Monsieur Latimer, and the social machinery that Naylor administered had begun to run. What started as petty institutional friction escalated in under 3 hours into coordinated ostracism, physical hazing, and a hand-lettered sign on standard Air Force masking tape. Mariana documented all of it, quietly in a second notebook she retrieved from inside her duffel. The notebook was the kind available at a base exchange. She filled 3 pages before noon. 2 staff sergeants from the maintenance squadron sat at the next table in the Wing dining facility and openly read from a group chat on a phone screen, nicknames printed there, Clipboard Karen and AFSEC Sally, and a photograph of her walking the flight line, shot from behind without her knowledge. Technical Sergeant Fowler, late 30s, slid uninvited into the seat across from her and told her the table was reserved for Wing personnel. It was not. She looked at him for 1 second, collected her tray and coffee, and moved to the far corner, back to the wall. Sight lines to all 3 dining facility exits and the fueling apron window. She tracked a ground tug movement across the fueling apron through the north window without breaking stride during the tray transfer. Fowler watched her choose the corner. He had expected her to argue about the table, or to look embarrassed, or to ask him where she was supposed to sit instead. She had done none of these things. She had simply looked at him for 1 second, cataloging, not challenging, and moved. He sat at the table she vacated and told himself she was just another contractor who couldn't handle Wing culture. He believed it for approximately 6 minutes, until he replayed in his mind the specific angle at which she had surveyed the dining facility's north window before sitting down, and stopped believing it without having any word for what he believed. Instead, he didn't understand what he was watching. The gap between what he saw and what it meant would have consequences. At 11:15, civilian HR specialist Gerald Pruitt, 44, informed her that her flight line badge access had been flagged for documentation review and temporarily deactivated. He slid a controlled document verification form across the desk, the bureaucratic mechanism Brooks had chosen to create the paper appearance of a legitimate grievance process. She signed the form, folded her copy precisely along existing crease lines, placed it in the second notebook. She asked Pruitt one question. Who initiated? He did not answer. She wrote the time, 11:17, in the margin, drew a box around it, and left without another word. She had addressed him as Mr. Pruitt for the first exchange, then shifted to silence. No civilian filler. No okay, or sure, or I understand. She gave him exactly the words a deposition would require, and nothing more. Every syllable was functional. None were wasted. Back at the visitor pavilion, the same asphalt, the same location where Naylor had shoved her 6 hours earlier, someone had taped a hand-lettered sign to the pavilion table. Contractor Quarantine Zone. Standard tan Air Force masking tape. Cardboard with desk lamp pressure marks consistent with overhead fluorescent lighting at approximately 3 feet, consistent with the wing command section office layout. She photographed the sign with her phone, time-stamped the image, removed the sign, added it to the second notebook, folded, with forensic observations written on the back. Tape type. Font pressure. Cardboard source analysis. Naylor's position on the far apron at time of her arrival. Pace slowed exactly 2 steps as he passed, eyes forward, avoidance behavior consistent with prior knowledge of the sign's placement. She did not look angry. She looked like someone filling out a form she had expected to need. In the wing command section corridor at 12:30, Fowler shouldered into her from the left, deliberate, no eye contact, no pause in his stride. She absorbed the contact without staggering, weight transferred and recentered in 1 step, shoulder barely shifted, no stumble. The master sergeant trailing him watched her walk away and slowed his pace. She said 1 word over her shoulder. Sergeant. Flat. Not a greeting. A notation, as if categorizing him for a report she was already composing in her head, which she was. She wrote the time in the second notebook before she rounded the next corner. By noon, they had deactivated her badge, given her a nickname, assigned her a quarantine table, taped a sign to it, and physically shouldered her in a government corridor. She had documented all of it. The notebook had 3 pages of entries, and not 1 word of complaint. She closed it, clicked her pen, and looked across the asphalt at the wing command section. She wrote 1 final line in the margin of the last page and drew a box around it. Her expression had not changed in 6 hours. If watching her absorb all of that in silence made your jaw clench, hit subscribe. You're going to want to be in the room when the door closes on him. At 13:15, Brooks activated the final layer of institutional leverage available to him. He routed a fabricated controlled document violation through the security forces squadron. The claim, a classified thumb drive found in proximity to the contractor's assigned workspace. Senior Airman Cole Ramsey, 22, received an envelope with €200 and a set of instructions written on a torn notepad page. Mariana was escorted to a security forces holding room. On paper, every position she held had collapsed. Off paper, the trap had almost completely closed, around the wrong person. Ramsey read her administrative hold rights in the wrong order. He was working from a laminated card, skipping items, his voice moving a half-step faster than it should have. He was 22 years old. He was nervous, and the €200 were in his left cargo pocket, still in the envelope. Mariana sat in the chair, set her duffel on the floor beside her, hands flat on her thighs, shoulders back but not rigid, breathing rate indistinguishable from rest. Halpern stood at the observation glass with a stopwatch in his hand, a force of habit from 8 years of timing operators, in SEER and hostage resistance training evolutions, with the 24th Special Operations Wing. He recognized the posture without needing to think about it. This was not civilian compliance. This was a trained person choosing not to resist, because resistance was not yet tactically optimal. There was a specific quality to voluntary stillness that differed from fearful stillness in ways Halpern could not fully articulate, but immediately recognized. He had seen it in men who had survived 48 hours of controlled interrogation and come out the other side still functional. He started the stopwatch. He had run 46 SEER training evolutions in 8 years with the 24th. He had watched operators crack at 9 minutes under controlled duress, and he had watched a combat controller once sit in a box for 18 minutes without his hands moving. What he was looking at in Holding Room 2 at 1330 hours at a NATO fighter wing in Italy was not the ordinary stillness of a person waiting for bureaucracy to resolve itself. It was intentional, chosen, the specific absence of motion that comes from a body that knows how to be somewhere without announcing itself. At 1338, Ramsey approached the duffel with a clipboard as pretext, positioned himself to shift it toward the table edge, and slid a thumb drive wrapped in a maintenance document into the duffel's side pocket. His hands were shaking hard enough that he fumbled the pocket's zipper pull and had to use both hands. Mariana watched the thumb drive go in without moving her head. Her eyes arced. Duffel, Ramsey's hands. Door angle, Ramsey's face. One smooth, unhurried sweep that lasted under a second. She said nothing. Ramsey stepped back. He could not tell if she had seen it. Through the glass, Halpern caught the eye arc and went very still. He had seen that specific movement pattern before. Not in an airman. Not in any base security forces member he had ever worked with. At 1342, Ramsey swiped her offset contractor ID through the DMDC biometric reader. He expected a routine flag. The screen returned. Storm 6, AFSOC SAPE, DOD IG Tier 1. Protected, unauthorized. Hold equals felony under 10 United States. Code Section 906. The cursor blinked 3 times and held. Ramsey stared at the screen. His face drained of color in the time it took to read the line twice. He read it a 3rd time. The words did not change. Mariana, still seated, said 4 words to Ramsey. Not a question. Not a threat. Step away from the terminal. He stepped away from the terminal. Halpern stood the instant Ramsey's posture broke, shoulders dropping, knees softening. The specific physical register of a person who has just understood the scale of what they have done. Halpern walked to the holding room door, opened it, looked at the screen, and then looked at her. He said her call sign aloud for the first time. Storm 6! Ramsey was still standing 3 feet from the terminal with his hands open at his sides. The stopwatch in Halpern's left hand read 14 minutes, 3 seconds. 14 minutes of voluntary stillness. He had never seen it in a contractor. He had never expected to. The DMDC terminal timed out and the screen went dark. The room was quiet, except for Ramsey's breathing. Mariana stood, picked up her duffel, zipped it closed over the planted thumb drive, and looked at Halpern. 2 words. Call it. He already had the phone in his hand. Ramsey did not move. He was staring at the space where the screen had been, trying to reconstruct what he had read and what it meant for him. Halpern spent 4 minutes and 11 seconds on 2 phone calls and 1 encrypted message. The first call went to a number not saved in his contacts. Master Sergeant retired Darnell Osei, 51, formerly 24th SOW combat controller, now a DOD contractor on the 24th's liaison desk at Hurlburt Field. Halpern described what he had observed in 7 sentences. The landing on the asphalt, the 14 minutes, the DMDC screen, the call sign. He did not editorialize. He gave Osei the facts in the same flat register he would have used to report a maintenance anomaly. Osei was quiet for 2 seconds. Then, if she's who you think she is, walk away. 7 words. That was all he said about who she was. Halpern told him about the eye sweep, 4 exits in under 10 seconds of Ramsey pulling the ID, never once positioned with her back to the vehicle bay approach. Osei did not respond to the surveillance detail. He said, "Walk away, Owen," a 2nd time. He meant it. Halpern hung up and called back in 40 seconds. The 2nd call was the same number. Halpern said 4 words. I'm not walking away. Osei was quiet for a full 3 seconds. Then stay out of her lines. Halpern knew exactly what that meant. Don't interfere with an active federal investigation, but don't obstruct it either. Be a wall, not a door, and not a window. He hung up. Whatever Storm 6 was auditing, it was larger than Aviano. Osei knew the call sign without being told what it meant. The Watcher was now navigating an active federal investigation without a clearance for it, and he had made his choice. In the wing command section at 1355, Brooks called Pruitt. Close out the access review and keep it clean. He told Naylor the hold would buy enough time for an IG flag to route through a contact at the 86th Airlift Wing by morning. The network would move the Frankfurt shipment overnight. 41 million euros in components did not wait for base politics to resolve themselves. Naylor's face showed the first visible unease. He asked, "What did the terminal actually say?" Brooks waved it off. "Contractor badge glitches happen. I've seen it twice in 3 years." Naylor did not press. He went quiet. But his face stayed uneasy for the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, a specific and persistent unease that had no clean source he could name. Not fear, exactly. Not guilt. Something more like the sensation of standing in a room and not being certain the floor was level. Brooks, who was not watching Naylor's face because Brooks never watched Naylor's face, did not notice. He was already thinking about Frankfurt. He was already 3 steps ahead of this. He had been 3 steps ahead for 3 years, and he had not yet learned that 3 steps ahead of the wrong person is exactly the same as standing still. Brooks did not know what the screen said. His confidence was built on ignorance. The pivot point was already past him. At 14:10, Halpern sent a 3-line encrypted message to the AFIG duty officer at the Pentagon, citing AFI 9301, paragraph 7.3. Witness to potential retaliation against protected complainant. Tier 1 status confirmed, via DMDC. He included only what he had directly observed. Timeline, the hold, the terminal read, and the planted item. No inference, no theory. Only facts, dated, timed, and attributed to their specific source. A sealed envelope slid under the holding room door. Mariana read it. A USO Command Authority hold confirmation, signed by a name 2 full pay grades above anyone currently assigned to Aviano, authorizing her to remain in situ and continue audit activity pending resolution. She folded it into thirds and placed it in the second notebook. Then she retrieved her AFIG secure handheld from inside her polo's concealed inner pocket and pressed it twice. 2-tap confirmation signal, sent and received. She had never been cut off from her chain of command. The network above her had been watching this unfold in real time, every hour of it. Halpern ended the second call, walked to the watch floor window, and looked across the apron. Through the glass, he could see Brooks exiting the wing command section with the easy stride of a man who believed he had just resolved a problem. Shoulders back, pace unhurried, eyes on the far end of the apron, where his network's interests lay. Halpern watched him for 3 full seconds. He did not pick up the phone again. He did not cross the apron. He did not warn him. Subscribe to Honor Tales. What the Watcher heard on that phone is the reason she walked into this base in the first place. At some point in the late afternoon, she was released to the visitor quarters under administrative hold, non-custodial. The precise distinction Halpern had ensured was documented in the file before anything else. The room was a standard TLF unit. 1 desk, 1 window facing the flight line, 1 narrow bed with a military-issue blanket folded at the foot. She did not sit on the bed. She sat at the desk. From inside the duffel's outer mesh pocket, she retrieved 3 items, placing each one without looking, as if their positions had been memorized in a room she had occupied before and would occupy again. She arranged them on the desk in a triangle. She did not touch them again for a long time. A matte black challenge coin. One face worn smooth by contact over time, not years, but the specific repeated contact of a thumb that returns to the same surface, in the same motion under the same internal conditions. A folded 4x6 photograph, edges creased from folding and unfolding many times, the image at the center protected, the borders worn. A DFC citation on letterhead, 3 typed lines, no ceremony date, no ceremony location, no witness names. Signed and stamped, and otherwise silent. She looked at the flight line through the TLF window. An F-16 from the afternoon sortie banked overhead, contrail beginning to form above the pink line of the Apennines. She watched it until the sound faded and the contrail began to dissolve. The room was very quiet. Her voice, low, almost without sound. Same lot numbers, Anna. Same optics. I found them. She stopped mid-sentence. She did not finish it. As if she would not permit herself to say the last clause aloud, even alone, in a room with no witnesses. The incompleteness was the grief. 12 words shorter than what she had actually thought, because what she had thought could not be spoken yet. In October 2024, a 4-ship F-16 Charlie strike package called Storm Flight had lifted from Incirlik Air Base in Turkey on a tasking against a regime-aligned procurement convoy, moving man-pads components and associated targeting optics through the Tigris Valley. Storm 6 led. Captain Anna Bekoff flew her left wing. Major Devon Hollis led the trail pair with Major Reuben Marks on his wing. The target was confirmed, and the corridor was supposed to be clean. 2 aircraft were lost to surface-to-air missile fire. Captain Anna Bekoff was killed in the cockpit. Major Devon Hollis was lost in egress, killed in action, body recovered 17 days later by Special Forces ground personnel. Major Reuben Marks ejected and survived. He was recovered by Special Tactics Pararescue 72 hours after ejecting, alive on a survival radio and 2 energy bars in terrain that should not have supported a survivor. Captain Mariana Milton brought the surviving package home through 3 separate SAM thread envelopes with a damaged terrain following and terrain avoidance system, flying manual corrections through mountain terrain at night at low altitude, navigating by memory and instrument cross-check when the TFTA dropout exceeded 30 seconds. The Distinguished Flying Cross with Combat Valor device was awarded in a room with 7 chairs and a locked door, and a general who shook her hand and told her she wasn't permitted to speak about what she had done for the next 8 years. She said, "Yes, sir." She walked out of that room alone. The coin on the desk was Anna Bekoff's. She had carried it since the day they handed her Anna's personal effects in a cardboard box at Incirlik, and a sergeant she didn't know said he was sorry for her loss. The ManPad's optics lot numbers from the destroyed convoy in the Tigris Valley appeared on Brooks's Aviano disposition forms, the forms she pulled from Phase Doc 3 records on her first morning. Column 7, supply chain transaction numbers, cross-referenced with TCTO compliance logs. Hardware used to kill 2 of her pilots was now listed as decommissioned and destroyed in a falsified USAF maintenance record at a NATO fighter wing in northeastern Italy. She had not come here by accident. She had not come here for the audit. Her AFIG secure handheld vibrated once on the desk beside the coin. 1 line, no sender field. Convoy confirmed. 48 hours. She read it twice, set the phone face down on the desk, picked up the challenge coin, set it back down. Her jaw tightened. Not fear, not relief. Resolution. The kind that follows a decision already fully made and now simply executing. She stood. She locked the desk drawer with the coin, the photograph, and the citation inside. Put the key in her polo's inner pocket beside the secure handheld. walked to the TLF window and looked at the flight line. The F-16s sitting dark against the last of the Tuscan dusk. Their outlines precise and known. Shapes she had memorized at 24 and would not forget. She did not look away for a long time. Then she sat back at the desk, opened the second notebook to a fresh page, and uncapped her pen. She had work to do tonight. By 0800 the following morning, Brooks had decided the administrative hold was not holding. He called Naylor into the wing command section and delivered 2 instructions, one procedural, one that defined the arc of everything that followed. Naylor wrote both down on a notepad page in his own handwriting. That was the first mistake. The second mistake was that the wing command section hallway security camera had been operational for 19 days following a 2024 USAF-based security systems upgrade, and it had a directional condenser microphone with a pickup radius of 4 meters through standard interior doors. Brooks had not had it flagged for maintenance because he did not know it existed. It was not on the legacy camera registry. The camera recorded at 1,080 lines of resolution. The audio was admissible in a general court-martial proceeding under the military rules of evidence. At 0810, with the office door not fully latched, left ajar by Naylor coming in, the camera captured Brooks instructing Naylor to have the fabricated controlled document violation documented as confirmed in the security forces case file, citing the planted thumb drive as evidence of discovery. A direct order to falsify an official military investigative record. He told Naylor to route the signed finding through Ramsey's signature specifically and to backdate the entry to the previous afternoon. Both names were spoken clearly. The instruction repeated once for emphasis, at a slightly higher volume. Probable cause for charges under UCMJ Articles 92, 107, and 10 United States Code Section 906, recorded, time-stamped, with audio that a court reporter could transcribe verbatim. In the visitor pavilion at that same moment, Mariana wrote 0811 in the second notebook and underlined it twice. She had not been told about the recording. She was documenting on schedule. She had anticipated this window from the moment Brooks told Pruitt to close out the access review. At 0815, her AFIG secure handheld vibrated twice, the 2-tap return on the signal she had sent from the holding room. She read the single line on the screen. Put the phone away. Finished the last entry in the second notebook, closed it, and tucked it into the duffel's inner document pocket, which she zipped and secured with its secondary closure. For the first time since she walked onto Aviano's asphalt the morning before, she smiled. Not at anyone. Not for show. Small, private, the left corner of the mouth, almost amused. The expression of someone watching the last piece of something complicated click into place without requiring their intervention. In the security forces building at 0825, Ramsey opened the case file to enter the falsified backdated finding. His hands were shaking worse than they had the previous afternoon. He stared at the entry field, typed a character, and deleted it. Typed again, and deleted again. He stared at the screen for 41 seconds without entering anything. Halpern could see him from the watch desk through the interior glass. Then Ramsey closed the case file, pulled out his personal phone, and called a number. He said 4 words. "I can't do this." He did not say who he was calling. Halpern watched the shaking in Ramsey's hand slow. The call lasted 40 seconds. When it ended, Ramsey stood at the terminal for a moment, then put his personal phone in his leg pocket and walked away from the desk. €200 was not enough. In the end, that was what the record would say about him. At 0840, Brooks walked the corridor from the command section toward the operations bay. Mariana walked the opposite direction, her badge reactivated by Halpern's watch override under the Tier 1 hold confirmation authority. They passed 6 feet apart under fluorescent light in a government hallway. Neither spoke first. She glanced at his collar device, Chief Master Sergeant E9, and said one word. "Chief." kept walking. It was not a greeting. It was a classification, precise and complete. The same word she had used on the asphalt when he seized her arm. Both times it meant the same thing. I see exactly what you are, and that is the entirety of what you are. Brooks stopped walking. He turned and watched her go around the corner. He was trying to understand the expression he had caught on her face for a fraction of a second before she looked away. Something small and private, and not directed at him, but at some internal calculation he could not see. He could not read it. He should have been able to. That was the point. For the first time in 3 years of running his network, 41 million euros moved, 14 officers compromised, 3 NATO bases in play, a Frankfurt shell company that had survived 2 routine audits. He felt it. The cold suspicion that the ground had already shifted beneath him, and he had not yet looked down to confirm it. He had no name for what had happened in that corridor. He would have a name for it tomorrow. At 11:47 hours on the second day, an unmarked convoy of 3 vehicles rolled through Aviano's main gate with a Yusuf of Africa security force escort. No gate guard pre-alert, no wing command advance notification, no base-wide announcement of any kind. At 11:52, the maintenance pass-down formation was recalled to the Hangar 3 apron. Same airmen, same formation positions, same asphalt, where the shove had happened 29 hours earlier. 200 people standing at attention under a midday Tuscan sun, with the Apennines clear and sharp on the eastern horizon, and none of them knew why they were there. They would know in under 4 minutes. 3 unmarked vehicles stopped on the apron. AF OSI unit configuration, USAF of Africa Protocol Security Escort. General Tobias Riggs, 4-star commander of United States Air Forces in Europe and Air Forces Africa, stepped from the second vehicle in full service dress, with ribbons and command identification. He walked across the asphalt at a measured pace, no hurry in any part of him. He crossed the exact line of asphalt where Mariana's clipboard had skid-marked the previous morning. At the near edge of the formation, Halpern said it low, not to himself, to the airman standing beside him. "That's Storm 6. The airman did not know what a call sign was. Halpern did not elaborate. His eyes were already on the security forces building entrance door. Mariana walked out of the SF building in the same tan slacks and the same navy polo, the AFSEC contractor lanyard still around her neck. She stopped at the painted yellow safety line. Same line. Same asphalt. The morning's light was directly overhead now. No shadows on the apron. Nothing softening what was visible to 200 people standing at attention. General Riggs crossed the last 15 feet and rendered a full formal salute. She returned it. A 4-star general does not salute a captain. The protocol does not work in that direction. It never has. Tobias Riggs was not saluting her rank. He was saluting the asphalt she had absorbed, the 14 minutes in the holding room, and the 41 million euros she had just finished locking up. He was saluting the 2 names on the Aviano chapel plaque that her audit had given context to. The 200 airmen standing at attention in front of Hangar 3 did not make a sound. The AFIG Trial Council stepped forward and handed her a sealed envelope. A UCMJ quash order dissolving the administrative hold, authorizing immediate arrest action against Brooks, Naylor, and Ramsey, signed at the Secretary of the Air Force level. She took it one-handed, tucked it under her arm without opening it, and looked across the formation. 2 words, spoken to no one specifically and everyone simultaneously. As briefed. The formation understood nothing and everything at once. On the apron, 30 meters from the formation's near edge, Brooks had watched the convoy arrive without pre-notification. He saw Riggs emerge in full dress. Unannounced. A 4-star here, at Hangar 3, mid-morning, without protocol coordination. Confusion first, the reflexive administrative question of a man used to receiving advance notice of senior officer visits. Then disbelief as Riggs walked toward the contractor. The same woman, tan slacks, navy polo, AF-Sec lanyard. The contractor from yesterday morning. The same woman he had put on the asphalt. Then recognition, as Riggs rendered the salute, and she returned it without hesitation, without adjustment, without any of the physical register of a person receiving unexpected honor. She had expected this. She had known this was coming. She had been waiting, with 14 minutes of stillness and 6 hours of documentation, and a second notebook already in evidence. Then horror, because she was looking across the formation in his direction, and he understood at last. She had never been auditing flight line safety procedures. For 2 days on this base, she had been auditing him. Every step he took, every call he made, every order he delivered, she had been present, and she had been looking directly at the thing he believed was invisible. His hands at his sides, in the formation, opened and closed once. He did not speak. 2 AFOSI special agents moved through the formation to Brooks and Naylor simultaneously, smooth, coordinated, and unhurried. 2 security forces personnel led by Halpern approached Ramsey at the SF building entrance separately. Arrest clean and by regulation. Rights read, hands secured. The formation at attention throughout. Brooks did not resist. He looked at the asphalt where the clipboard had skidded 29 hours ago. He looked at her. She was already pointing to a line in the quash order for the trial counsel's reference. She did not watch him being led away. She had given that moment exactly the attention it required. A single arc of the eyes to confirm the arrest was proceeding correctly. Regulation, by the numbers, nothing extra. And then she returned to the work. There was always more work. There was the trial counsel's timeline to confirm, the quash orders provisions to walk through, the chain of custody documentation for the second notebook to initiate. The asphalt where Brooks had stood this morning was asphalt. The yellow line was paint. The work was the work. Her eyes tracked him across the asphalt, one full beat, the same steady arc she used to track fuel trucks and ground tugs crossing the flight line. Then her eyes returned to the trial counsel's clipboard. One word. Here. The trial counsel circled it. The work continued. The Brooks network did not collapse. It dissolved. The distinction matters. Collapse implies something that fell under its own weight. What happened to the logistics diversion ring that had moved 41 million euros in man-pads components, F-16 munitions optics, body armor, and crypto modules through a Frankfurt shell company to a Belgrade-based broker was not a fall. It was a harvest. Mariana had planted the audit trail herself, across 22 hours on a base where everyone believed they were shutting her out. The second notebook was evidence. Every timestamp, every box drawn around a name, every forensic notation was a count on someone's charge sheet. 11 mid-tier indictments across 3 NATO bases, Aviano, Ramstein, Naples, in the 72 hours that followed. The Frankfurt shell company shuttered, its accounts frozen. 41 million euros in equipment and liquid assets were locked. Bundeswehr liaison NCO Hauptfeldwebel Andreas Stoss was taken into German federal custody at his Wiesbaden apartment at 0430 hours in his bathrobe, with a cup of coffee still on the kitchen counter. 7 of the 11 indictment counts included man-pads optics lot numbers matching the hardware recovered from the October 2024 Tigris Valley convoy, the same convoy that cost Captain Anna Beckhoff and Major Devon Hollis their lives. The documentation came from Phase Doc 3 supply chain transaction records, column 7, pulled by Mariana on her first morning on this base, before Brooks had finished deciding she was a problem he could end in public. Senior Airman Cole Ramsey was not indicted. He faced Article 15 non-judicial punishment proceedings. His cooperation The 40-second phone call at 0840, the 4 words, "I can't do this," had gone to Halpern's watch desk and been logged as a voluntary witness statement within 3 minutes. The €200 were in evidence. The planted thumb drive was Exhibit A. Ramsey was reassigned to a stateside unit pending the proceedings' outcome. He was 22 years old. He had stopped. In the end, the record said that about him, and that was not nothing. Marko Vrana, 58, Belgrade-based broker and operational buyer for the network, crossed the Austrian border at Klagenfurt at 11:43 hours, 17 minutes before the warrant team arrived at the crossing point. A border surveillance camera captured him in a dark overcoat, single rolling bag, and a cash transaction at the crossing cafe. The image was distributed to Interpol and Austrian federal police within the hour. The net was closing in a northward direction. It was not yet closed. One node of the network was still walking. Brooks's case was referred to a general court-martial convening authority within 10 days. Charges: conspiracy to commit larceny of government property, dereliction of duty. UCMJ Article 92, failure to obey a lawful order. Article 107, false official statements. 10 United States Code. Section 906, felony interference with a Tier 1 federal investigator. Naylor charged jointly. The wing was assigned an interim command chief from Ramstein. The 31st Fighter Wing continued its operational schedule without interruption. The apron in front of Hangar 3 looked exactly as it always had. The yellow safety line was still painted on the asphalt. She took the shove. She sat in the room. She documented everything they did to her, and she handed them every count on their charge sheets herself, one box drawn around one name at a time. If you stayed all the way to the salute, subscribe. There's another mission queued for tomorrow, and the next operator is already in the room. 3 weeks after a 4-star saluted her on the same asphalt, where she had been put face down by a man who thought rank was power, Captain Mariana Milton stood in the Aviano Wing Chapel garden on a quiet Sunday morning. The garden was a small enclosed courtyard with a low stone wall and a memorial plaque for 31st Fighter Wing personnel lost in service. She was in civilian clothes, not the contractor polo, not a uniform. Her own clothes, a gray jacket, jeans, boots. She was alone. The Sunday morning light came in at a low angle over the stone wall, catching the edge of the memorial plaque and the tops of the rosemary planted along the base. An F-16 from the morning sortie banked overhead, low, contrail just beginning to form above the tree line at the Apennine edge. She watched it bank and listened to the sound fall away. When it was gone, the garden was quiet again. She read a message on her AFIG secure handheld, read it twice, held the phone for a moment, then put it in her jacket pocket. She looked at the memorial plaque. 2 names from October 2024 were there, added 4 months after the operation, in a small ceremony she had not attended because she was already 2 assignments deep into what came after. She already knew both names. She had known them for a year and a half. The message on the screen held for a moment in a tight frame before she put the phone away. Storm is still standing. Vrana is in Bratislava. Attached, a geo-tagged border camera still, timestamp 2 days old, a cathedral spire visible in the upper right corner of the frame, Bratislava, Slovakia, and a figure in a dark overcoat at the left edge, face angled away from the camera, rolling bag at his side. Coded greeting in the header. Specific image in the attachment. Named theater in the geo-tag. She did not sit down. She stood at the plaque for another minute, the Sunday light on the stone, the rosemary at the wall base giving off its specific smell in the morning warmth. Then she put the handheld back in her jacket pocket and walked out of the garden under the dissolving contrail into the morning. 3 weeks after a 4-star saluted her on the same asphalt, where she had been put face down by a man who thought rank was power, Captain Mariana Milton stood in the chapel garden at Aviano and read 4 words on a secure screen. 4 words, and the next operation had already begun. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.